The open-air markets of Victorian England not only contain your favourite produce, but they could also contain an unwanted wife and child for auction. Yes, you heard me correctly. During the 1700s right up till early 1900s, it was possible to sell your wife and children instead of exposing your entire family to the judging world that you were getting a divorce. To start with Victorian society, the way of life and family dynamics were very different back then. Yes, women's rights were non-existent, but honestly the selling of other humans makes you think of ancient times, or the terrible slave trade. Not simply you were sick of your Victorian wife and decided to sell her the next weekend at the markets. Okay, it may not have been that bad. Some historians even indicate that in some sales the woman is said to have instigated the sale because she wanted to be with her lover. Wife sales are said to have begun at the end of the 17th century. A recorded sale in November 1692 occurred, and it was written John, the son of Nathan Whitehouse of Tipton, sold his wife to Mr. Bracegirdle, although the manner of the sale is unrecorded. This was the start of the polarizing practice in the Victorian era. The sale of your wife could be attended by huge crowds. An 1806 sale in Hull was postponed, owing to the crowd which such an extraordinary occurrence had gathered together. This does indicate that wife sales were relatively rare events, but a very popular form of entertainment. Estimates of the wife sales do number up to 400 between the late 1700s and early 1900s, which on the other hand is a very low number compared to the instances of desertion, which in the Victorian era numbered in the tens of thousands. Sale Prep was placing an ad in town so that everyone knew your wife was up for sale. You would then place a halter, which could be a lovely ribbon, around her neck and parade her through town to the sale yard. You would then attach her to a post along with a tie around her waist. The auction would begin, and of course the highest bidder would win. Now here is the catch: a lot of times the purchaser had already been predetermined. How is this possible? Well, before we get into that, let's look at what the other options were to end a marriage. When a woman married during this era, all her worldly goods became the husband's, including land, property, wealth, everything. She was simply another possession for him according to the law. So if you needed to part ways due to fighting, or you simply had a new mistress, what could you do? Here were your options. One way out was death. Obvious, let's move on. Next up was to sue in the ecclesiastical courts for separation from bed and board, on the grounds of adultery or life-threatening cruelty. But it did not allow remarriage, so this was a bit tricky. Divorce was a very expensive process, and was left to the elite and royals if they managed to. Divorce during this time was frowned upon, and certainly led to an enormous amount of gossip on the social scene. An alternative to divorce was to obtain a private separation, which still cost money, or you could try desertion or elopement when the wife was forced out of the family home, or the husband simply set up a new home with his mistress. Finally, the less popular notion of wife selling was an alternative but illegitimate method of ending a marriage. So if you were poor, it was a perfect quick solution to a major problem in your life. There were only 8 sales recorded between 1690 and 1750. Most, however, went unrecorded, but when a sale happened in Oxford in 1789, it was noted that wife selling is now described as the vulgar form of divorce lately adopted. This told us that the practice was now well established in some parts of the country and was slowly spreading to others. So just who were these women being sold? Were they poor work housewives or ladies of reasonable wealth? Generally speaking, they were of the working class. Some excerpts taken from history. In January 1815, John Osborne planned to sell his wife at the local market. However, as no market was held that day, the sale took place instead at the sign of the Coal Barge, in Earl Street, where in a very regular manner, his wife and child were sold for £1 to a man named William Sergeant. In July the same year, a wife was brought to Smithfield Market by coach and sold for 50 guineas and a horse. Once the sale was complete, the lady, with her new lord and master, mounted a handsome curricle which was in waiting for them, and drove off, seemingly nothing loath to go. At another sale in September 1815, at Staines Market, only 3 shillings and 4 pence were offered for the lot. No one went against the bidder, as it appeared the wife for sale had already been in a long and intimate friendship with him. These sales sound very calm and well-mannered, not a drunk and raucous place with men yelling to purchase a wench. Now to sell your wife, she had to agree to it. Well, we'd like to hope so. At least she had this much say in the whole process. Sometimes you will find it was the wife's desire to be sold and not the husband. And not only agreeing to the sale, she had to approve of the purchaser. An example of this was from a sale in 1824. In Manchester, it says that after several biddings, the wife was knocked down for 5 shillings. But not liking the purchaser, she was put up again for 3 shillings and a quart of ale. Shockingly, sometimes the wife was already living with her new partner. In another case, which dates 1804, a London shopkeeper comes home to find his wife in bed with a stranger. As you can guess, there was an altercation between the two men. However, they settled it, and her new man offered to purchase the wife. The shopkeeper agreed. No long drawn-out counseling session. It was a simple, quick cut and dry business transaction. What about the wives who did not agree to it, or were caught by surprise? Surely this had to have happened. If we know anything about humans, we are a crafty bunch. That would be simply horrific, suddenly finding yourself up for sale with no say. Well, this actually happened and was recorded. In March 1766, a carpenter from Southwark sold his wife in a fit of conjugal indifference at the alehouse. She was probably at home doing chores, heading to bed, all while her husband sat drinking away his income, going over in his head how he could have won the previous argument. Then in a blast of anger he sells her. The catch in this story is that once he sobered up, the man asked his wife to return. She refused, and sadly he hung himself. Most sales had the joint intent as a way to end a marriage and give it the legitimacy of divorce. Why is this, you ask? Well, the sale is done in public. With a ribbon around her neck, leading your wife for sale showed the intent and purpose of you both. That ultimately this legal union of body and finances was over for all to witness. Once she left with her new man, the old husband did not have to pay for her lifestyle anymore. I guess sometimes this may have been kinder than going to the poorhouse. Some ex-husbands went so far as to walk around town and announce that he was no longer with his wife. One man's point was made in an advertisement placed in the Ipswich Journal in 1789. No person or persons to entrust her with my name, for she is no longer my right. Basically, it meant do not sell anything to her under my name. Do not allow her any credit in my name. I guess some may have been caught out by a sneaky ex-wife. Wife sales could take place in many different places, but in Sussex, inns and public houses were a hotspot for wife selling. Not only coins were accepted, but also alcohol was allowed as a part payment. For example, when a man sold his wife at the Shoulder of Mutton and Cucumber in Yapton in 1898, the purchaser paid 7 shillings, approximately £40 in 2023, and 1 imperial quart of beer. A sale a century earlier in Brighton involved 8 pots of beer and 7 shillings, £40 in 2023. And then in Ninefield, way back in 1790, a man swapped his wife at the Village Inn for half a pint of gin, only to change his mind and buy her back later. So we have heard about agreed sales, forced sales, and general sales. However, not everyone during this time found it to be an acceptable practice. It was noted by a journalist in the Times as early as July 1797. On Friday, a butcher exposed his wife to sale in Smithfield Market, near the Ram Inn, with a halter about her neck, and one about her waist, which tied her to a railing, when a hog driver was the happy purchaser, who gave the husband 3 guineas and a crown for his departed rib. Pity it is, there is no stop put to such depraved conduct in the lower order of people. Judges and journalists alike were not impressed with this behavior. The wealthy were not involved in this type of conduct, so it was firmly only an action taken by a lower-class Victorian. There are more cases of regular people not standing for this type of behavior. Even in about 1777, a wife sale in Carmarthenshire produced in the crowd a great silence and a feeling of uneasiness in the gathering. Another was when a labourer offered his wife for sale on Smithfield Market in 1806. The public became incensed at the husband and would have severely punished him for his brutality, but for the interference of some officers of the police. Wife selling had really reached its peak by the 1830s. By the mid-19th century, the practice of wife selling had declined and was eventually made illegal by the Matrimonial Causes Act of 1857. However, this did not stop the sales. Finally, I bet you are wondering when the last sale of an unhappy wife occurred. Well, the most recent case of an English wife sale was reported in 1913. when a woman giving evidence in a Leeds police court during a maintenance case claimed that her husband had sold her to one of his workmates for £1, which is equivalent to about £100 in 2023. Just enough for a nice bottle of red wine and a steak.